Reed from Decatur, Georgia. Reed said, I don't get why you wouldn't support all leagues playing the same number of conference games instead of being okay with the SEC hiding from competition and playing 8. Look, I've listened to this for the better part of a week. I'm tired of talking about it, but you're not. And I do have a couple of angles I want to go with you tonight that I have not spoken about on this show. Can we just put it all out there in the open? When people say the SEC should play 9 conference games, whether you believe it or not, you've got the same opinion I do. I want them to play 9 conference games. I'm not against it. In fact, last show, I emphatically stated multiple times, yeah, in a perfect world, I'd like them to play 9 conference games. That came off somehow as me defending the SEC playing 8 conference games. But anyway, I digress. If you don't like the current setup and you say, I just prefer them to play 9, that's fine. Even if I disagree with you, that's fine. There are too many people of Reed's ilk out there. Reed, I love you, so this is not a shot at you as a person. I don't like your take. There are too many people like Reed out there right now who are going to the old standby of the SEC is scared. The SEC is hiding from competition. And the SEC, here's my favorite. It's so easy to beat down like a piñata logically, but here's my favorite. The SEC is masking things. And the way it really goes is, I guess masking's not the right word. Here it is. The SEC is inflating themselves by playing only 8 conference games. And I think our buddies at College Football Nerds did a really good job of summing this up today. And so I'm showing one of their tweets on the screen right now. And if you're listening on podcast, here's what it says. In the playoffs, 9-game conferences are 3-12 versus 8-game conferences. 9-gamers have blown out 8-gamers twice. 8-gamers have blown out 9-gamers 8 times. And here's the point. If that lost you, if that's just minutia for you, here's the hammer home point. If 8-game conferences work the system to unfairly get in the playoffs, the results would be the opposite. It's a great point. It in more words, is saying what I tried to tell you the other day. The claim that you just want them to play 9 games is fine. But the claim that you want them to play 9 games because somehow the 8-game conference schedule falsely props them up is false. And the way you know it's false is because eventually they have to get to the playoff and play against conferences that played the 9-game league schedule. If you were right about the SEC being falsely inflated, they'd get exposed. They don't. The opposite happens. To this point, no team from a conference that plays 9 conference games has ever won a national title. Ever. Like in all the years we've done it. The only year it happened was a technicality. It was the 2020 COVID year, and that was the year Bama won it, and they played all Power 5 competition. So relative to the rest of the country, they had a scheduling disadvantage that year. There's this other part of the argument where 8 games doesn't make sense. This is the one I wanted to hit on tonight, and I'm going to give our buddies at College Football Nerds more credit. I'm going to go right back to them again because it was like the Steve Austin promo after King of the Ring 96. They spit out 2 winners here over the course of like a couple of seconds. So people who claim the 8-game conference schedule is just corrupt, it doesn't make sense. It should be 9 or nothing. I actually don't agree with that. If you ask me my perfect world, I agree with our buddies at CFB Nerds. Listen to this. Think about it before you just start screaming at your phone. Think about this for a second. They said the same thing I agree with. They said our desired model has always been all Power 5 conferences play 8 games in conference, and then they require 2 out-of-conference Power 5 opponents. You know what that does? What it does is it gives a tremendous amount of cross-conference data points. Right now, you're just asking teams to load up within their own conference. And that's wonderful for being able to figure out how good teams are within their conference. But a lot of the conversation about college football is national. Like when you see polls come out on Sunday, when you see the College Football Playoff Committee meet, they're not putting out Big Ten rankings. They're not putting out SEC rankings or Pac-12 rankings. They're putting out national rankings. And they're consequential when it comes to the committee. You know what would greatly help? It would greatly help when we're wondering what 9-1 means in the ACC versus a 9-1 in the Big 12. It would help if we had a lot more out-of-conference data points. It would help if NC State had played Oklahoma State. It would help if Auburn had played Arizona State. Those data points help because then you can extrapolate accordingly and you can figure out conference versus conference. What does the 6 seed here look like relative to the 4 seed there? As it stands, you have to wait until bowl season for that. And by that point, folks are opting out. And in some cases, you're not even getting a true result. And by then, it's too late anyway. I love that model. If you ask me my perfect model, I want all of them playing 8 conference games and then requiring at least 2 Power 5 non-conferences. And by the way, that's a minimum. Feel free to play more, especially if we're properly interpreting strength of schedule amongst the committee. Feel free to play more. This fascination with 9 games, I in some ways I get where it comes from, because in the world we live in, if we're not all going to play 8, I'm all for the entertainment product being ramped up. So I'm fine with the SEC. If they want to go to 9 games, I'd even support it. My perfect world is much more in line with what CFB nerds said, which is every conference plays 8, and then you beef up your out-of-conference schedule. Like, I'd love to see cross-conference competition pre-bowl season as much as possible. But the conference game as a metric has been so warped over the past few years. People pretending like your 9th game of the year, if it's against a conference opponent, just carries so much more weight. Like playing someone in your conference is worth 125% of playing someone good from another conference. No, it's the strength of your schedule, period. That's all I care about. I don't care about how many of the teams came from your conference. Ultimately, I know you're going to have a big enough sample size of conference play that you can then seed your conference title game and crown a champ. I don't ever worry about that, whether you're playing 8 or 9. I would love a world where we've got a healthy dose of both. We got a nice, sizable portion of conference play. It's like 2/3 of your schedule or however that fraction works out. But then there is also a couple of really good data points on here where you go play Minnesota. You go play Penn State. You go play Nebraska. Big Ten heavy there, I know. That's where I stand on that. So in conclusion, I don't know that it does me any good to say this over and over again. I wasn't defending it the other night. I led the segment and concluded the segment by saying I don't like the decision. I want them to play 9 conference games if this is the world we're going to live in. But I also said I do understand the realism of the moment instead of the idealism of the moment, and I get the reasons. I don't care about being bowl eligible. I don't care how much money ESPN is or isn't willing to pay you because none of those things really affect me or they don't matter to me. But I absolutely share your concern with you voluntarily beefing up your schedule only to be punished for playing a tougher schedule by a playoff committee that may or may not completely adhere to the you are what your record says you are philosophy. Did I say that too fast? Probably. I'm not going to say it again, though. So I think there were some valid concerns in the SEC's room, even if I didn't get the result I wanted. I didn't think it was stupid. I didn't think it was the worst decision, like a catastrophic decision. It was a decision, and it's temporary, and in 2030, you won't be worried about it.